Hi, I'm Christina, and today I'm going to look at all my best books according to Goodreads. Now, I've seen quite a few of my favourite booktubers do this recently, and I thought it was a really fun idea, so here we are. So, let's just say I have read 442 books in my adult life, and they are all here, so let's see which ones are the best. So, in first position is a book called Dead Gorgeous, which I think is quite strange. So let's just have a look at this one. So it's got an average rating of 5. And the reason why is, so I'm actually the only person that's ever rated this book. It has 1 rating on Goodreads and I gave it 5. And I remember this book, I got it from my local library and it's by a local author. So I'm literally the only person that's read it on here. And it was actually pretty good. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars, but I read it quite a few years ago now, and I probably wouldn't have been quite as generous, but it was about a young woman, and she has this beautiful set of very, very blonde hair extensions, and they're kind of cursed hair extensions, and all these kind of things go on with the cursed hair. And it was a really, really intriguing story. It was my first kind of foray into horror, and I just remember really enjoying it. So that was Dead Gorgeous by C.R. Sims. It's definitely not the best book I've ever read, but that one's an anomaly, so we'll just get rid of that one. So let's see what we have next. So in number 2 I have A Storm of Swords 2, Blood and Gold by George R.R. Martin, and I have to say I did love that series when I read it quite a few years ago, and it was one of my favourite series for a really, really long time, so it makes sense that that's up there. Number 3 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. That got 4.52 out of 5, and I gave it 5 out of 5, and I have to say, yeah, that book is absolutely wonderful. It's actually now my favourite science fiction book of all time. I loved it so much. It was so much fun. I was so connected to those characters. I just had such a good time with it. It really made me smile. It made me laugh out loud. And yeah, it was just a wonderful, wonderful story. I actually have a book review on that one, so I'll link that down below just in case you'd like to watch that. Yeah, I think that's definitely up there as one of my favourite books of all time. Like I said, it's my favourite science fiction book ever, so that deserves its place. That was really, really good. So let's see what we have next. 4th, I have Morning Star by Pierce Brown, which is part of the Red Rising series. I think it's book 3. I actually only gave that 3 stars, and the average rating is 4.48. I think I do really like the Red Rising series, and I am looking forward to whenever the new book gets published. I think my favourite books were the early ones. So the first book, Red Rising, is still my favourite out of the whole series, and obviously I wasn't as impressed with the 3rd one. I don't know I don't know why. And then I think I started to enjoy them more as the books got longer and more developed later on, when we were really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty politics of it, and there was so much character development and just so much going on. But yeah, I only gave it 3 stars, so it definitely isn't my favourite out of the series, but I can see why the sequels are going to be a lot more highly rated. And then the next one we have, and I'm going to agree with this one too, well, kind of. So it's The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osmond, and that's got a rating of 4.47, and I gave it 4 stars. And I have to say, I only read that one quite recently, and I loved the first book by Richard Osmond, The Thursday Murder Club. Such a good book, definitely one of my favourite books, one of my favourite mystery novels. Those characters are just so wonderful, and yeah, it made me smile so much. There's kind of a theme here, isn't there? If books made me really happy and smile. And yeah, it was really witty, it was very British, it was just really good fun, and I'd highly recommend that series. I actually didn't like the second book as much as the first, so I would say it's not one of the best books I've read, the second one, but the first one, absolutely wonderful. Highly, highly recommend it. So the next book is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I gave it 4 stars, and the average rating is 4.46. Now I have to say, might want to bump that one up to a 5 myself, because it's one of those books that's just stayed with me after having read it. I think I read that one in 2020. It might have been 2021. Pretty sure it was 2020. And yeah, I really like that. I thought it was such a good story. It took me a little while to get into it. I wasn't quite sure in the first few chapters. I was like, I don't know if I like it, but I stuck with it, and honestly, it was such a great payoff. It was absolutely worth reading it. I thought it was really good, and there were so many twists I didn't see coming. It was written very well, and I'm very much looking forward to the film adaptation of that. I know it's coming out, I think it's coming out this summer, and I think Daisy Edgar-Jones is the main girl, so the Marsh girl. So yeah, I think I'm gonna really like that film, and I would highly say definitely read that book, and it definitely deserves its place as one of the best books I've read. I'd say it's definitely a notable one. So the next one is another George R.R. Martin one. It's A Storm of Swords, Steel and Snow. I gave that one 4. And then I've got A Game of Thrones, which I gave 5 stars, and it got 4.4. I'm not going to go too much into all of the other sequels because I've already mentioned them. And then the next one is Golden Sun, which is the second Red Rising book that I just talked about. And then the next one is Dark Age, which is the 5th Red Rising one. So we'll just move on from all of these sequels. So the next one I have is Thunderhead, which is the second book in the Arc of the Scythe series. And I actually really liked the book Scythe. I thought it was really good. It's kind of YA, science fiction, dystopian. And it's such an interesting concept. So in this world, death doesn't exist anymore. Everybody is immortal and will live forever. And we've got rid of disease. And basically, the life is wonderful for everybody, but to make sure it's some kind of semblance of normality, they've brought in a group called Scythes, and they will kill people, and they have a quota of the amount of people that they have to kill, and it's all about population control. And it was really good. I really enjoyed the main characters. It was really good fun, and Thunderhead was good, but I think I enjoyed Scythe more, to be fair. I still need to finish that series. I haven't read it all, and would I say it's one of the best books I've ever read? Maybe not, but I can see it's very popular, and I did really enjoy my time with it, but I'm not sure if it's one of the best books. Honestly, looking at this massive list, I don't think they're all my favourite books. They're not my favourite books of all time, that's for sure. Apart from Project Hail Mary, that's definitely one of my favourite books of all time, but all of the others, not so much. So the next one is another George R.R. Martin, so we're just going to move swiftly past that. And then the next one is Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare, and I think I enjoyed my time with them when I read them, when I first kind of came onto BookTube, and I saw how beloved they were, and I was just so intrigued that I wanted to pick them up too. I only gave that book 3 stars, and it's got 4.37, and honestly, I think that's just, I had a good time at the time, but I'm not going to be reading any more of those. It's definitely not one of the best books I've ever read. And then the next one, the same can be said for the next one. So it's called Last Sacrifice, and it's part of the Vampire Academy series. It's number 6, and it's by Rochelle Mead, and it got 4.37, and I gave it 3. Now I have to say, I loved those books when I was younger. They were just so much fun. I'm not sure, they're not going to be my favourite books of all time, but I had such a good time with them. I was obviously a lot younger, and you know what, they were just a great time, and I have really fond nostalgic memories of all of those books. It's basically about a girl she is a vampire, and obviously it's a Vampire Academy, and she's kind of descended from royalty, and her best friend is a Damphir, and she's half human and half vampire, and they go to the same school, and it's going to be her job to protect her best friend, as it were. She's going to be like a warrior protector. I really enjoyed them. Not some of the best books of all time though. And then the next one is similar. It's The Indigo Spell, also by Rochelle Mead, but this is the other series. It's the Bloodline series, when we follow a different girl called Sydney, I believe, and I really enjoyed those. I obviously read the other one first, but I have to say I think I enjoyed the Bloodline series more than the original. So yeah, that was a good time too. The next one is another Cassandra Clare book, so we'll just move past it. And now we've got 3 Rochelle Mead books in a row, so we're going to move past those. And now we have a Michael Connolly book. So this was when I was very much into crime fiction. There was a couple years of my life that I would literally read crime fiction, and that was it. No variety, no different genres. That was the only thing I would read. And this one is The Wrong Side of Goodbye. I only gave it 3 stars. It's got 4.33, and I have to say, it's definitely not one of my favourite Michael Connolly books. I know in my head what some of my favourites are, and it's not that one. And if I am being completely honest, I have no recollection of what that story is specifically. It's part of the Harry Bosch series, and there's 28 books in that series, and I have mixed so many of them up in my head. I've read pretty much all of them. I think I've read about 25, and then I just was kind of done with that. That was kind of my part of my life that I was done with. And I read so many different genres now, and crime fiction isn't really one of them. And that was the 19th book in the series, but no, that's definitely not one of my favourite books of all time. It's not even one of my favourite Michael Connolly's, so I'm surprised that one is so high, honestly, compared to all of the other Michael Connolly. It's very strange. So the next one is Scythe, the Arc of a Scythe, the first one, and I've already talked about that one. 4.33 out of 5, and I gave it 4. That was a little bit stingy of me. I think that was deserving of a 5. Anyway, the next book is Matilda, and I gave that one 4 again out of 5, and it got a 4.33 by Roald Dahl, and that was obviously just a childhood classic that I really enjoyed, and I think I reread it when I was a little bit older, because these are only books that I've read since I've been an adult. I've obviously not gone back in time. I've got another George R.R. Martin book. I'm just going to skip all these sequels because it's kind of dull. And now we've got The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I thought that would be higher up the list, to be honest. It is 4.32, and I gave it 5 out of 5. And yes, I love these. They were some of my favourite books of all time. Maybe not so much still my favourite books of all time. Although, to be honest, maybe they are. For a certain few years of my life, if you would have asked me what my favourite books were, it would 100% have been The Hunger Games. And yeah, also very nostalgic, very fond of them, love the movies as well. So I'm glad that that one is up there. Now I've got another Rochelle Mead Bloodlines book, so I'm going to skip it. And now is a book I cannot remember reading. It's called After the Fire by Will Hill. I have no recollection of that book at all. Let me just have a little look at this. So I gave it I gave it 3 out of 5, and the average is 4.32. I read it in 2019, so it's only been 3 years, but no. It's definitely not one of my favourite books of all time. I had no recollection of reading that book. So that's that one. Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. So we'll just move past that. Another sequel. Well, it's the first one, but already mentioned it. So the next one is Sunset by Jessie Cave. I read that one this year and I enjoyed that one. I gave it 4 stars and it's got an average of 4.31. And I have to say that maybe I don't think it's really stuck with me, that book. I only read it this year and I did enjoy it, but I think looking back on it, it's more of a 3-star read to me now than a 4-star. I have a book review on that one as well, so I will link that down below just in case you'd like to hear my thoughts on it. It was quite moving. It was about, I don't want to ruin it, but it's mainly about death and grief and kind of moving past losing a loved one in a very tragic, unexpected kind of way. And it was written really well, I have to say. So the next one is Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead, moving past it. And then I've got Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, obviously second one in the Hunger Games. I have another Bloodlines book. Let's move past that one. So the next one is actually one of my favourite books of all time. Really excited to see that one. It is Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, and I gave it 5 out of 5. It is genuinely a brilliant book, and the average rating is a 4.29, and it's definitely my favourite book by her. And it is honestly one of my favourite books of all time. I love that book. It's so good. And it is up there. So far, I agree with Project Hail Mary. Wonderful, wonderful book. And I agree with Big Little Lies. Also wonderful. So I'm not quite sure how far down I should go here. Let's do a couple more. So I have City of Glass, which is another Cassandra Clare. So we're going to move past it. Here we go. We've got classic, finally, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I gave it 5 out of 5. Love that book. And 4.28 is its average rating. I would highly agree. It is one of the best books. It's one of my favourite books. So we've got 3 now on the list that I agree with. So doing quite well. People generally obviously love this book. And this is one of the first classic books that I truly loved and adored, and it has stuck with me. I must have read that book 3, 4, 5 times, I read it again a couple of times when I was at university because it was just such a comforting, lovely read. And yeah, I think it's a wonderful book. If you haven't read that one, it's definitely a classic you should absolutely read because it really is good. And now I've got an Agatha Christie book, and then there were none, and I gave that one 4 out of 5, and it got an average rating of 4.27. Now, yeah, it was okay. I don't think I'd give it a 4 nowadays. I read it a few years ago. I think that's more just of a 3-star book for me. And now, another more recent one. So this is interesting. So I've got Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I gave it only 3 stars, which actually, maybe I was being a bit harsh. Its average rating is 4.27. And in hindsight, maybe it was worth a 4 because it was so intriguing, so innovative, so unlike anything I've ever read before. And I have a book review video on that one too, so I will link that down below, just in case you'd like to watch it. And I have to say, yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. I had no idea what was going on, and I was so intrigued to see what was going to happen. It was, yeah, such a unique kind of story, and I love it when something's just so completely different from anything you've ever read before. So yeah, honestly, it's not one of my favourite books of all time personally, but I really enjoyed it, and I can see why it is so high because it is so unique, and it's really nice to see something quite different just being so high up on my list of what's best according to Goodreads. So the next one is another one that I absolutely agree with. It is Beartown by Frederick Backman, and it's 5 out of 5 stars from me. And it's no, it's not, I'm reading the wrong line. It's 4.27 with the average rating. And again, I would hands down agree. I adore this book. This is genuinely one of my favourite books of all time. If you were to ask me the question, what is your favourite book? I would have no answer, of course, because there's so many books going around in my head. But this would want to be the ones that would pop up. I think Beartown would pop up, and Project Hail Mary would pop up, Big Little Lies would, so many others. But genuinely, that would be one of the ones that I'd be thinking about if you asked that question. It was such a great story. It's quite dark at times. It difficult with very difficult topics. I just thought it was so good. He's so good at writing. He writes so beautifully. I was just captivated by this story, and it's been how many years since I've read it? I read it in 2017, so it's been 5 years. And honestly, I still think about that story. It's just really good. I need to read the sequel to that one. So it's getting quite long this now, so I'm just going to do a couple more, and then we're just going to call it quits. I've actually stopped counting where we're up to because I've skipped past so many sequels. So anyway, moving on. The next one is another Vampire Academy book, so right past it. And the next one is a book I have no recollection of. This is my crime fiction era. It's called Field of Prey. It's the 24th book in the Lucas Davenport series, and I have to say I don't think I read the other 23, so I just kind of went in there randomly. And it's by John Sandford. I only gave it 3. It got a 4.26 average. I have no recollection of that at all. 2016, so it was 6 years ago, but definitely not one of my all-time favourites. Didn't even know I'd read it. If you'd asked me if I read that book, I would have said no, 100% no. So the next one, and I think I'm going to leave it here. I think this is going to be the last one I talk about, and it is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Kale, Honeymoon. I gave it 5 out of 5. It got an average rating of 4.26, and I adore that book. It is so good. That's genuinely one of my favourite books of all time. I didn't even think about it before when I was thinking about my favourite books, but it's so good. It was my favourite book of 2020, hands down, wonderful book. And yeah, I still think about that so many times. I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh, this is similar to Eleanor Oliphant. And there was even a time when I was just Googling books similar to Eleanor Oliphant because I loved it so much and I just wanted to read more like it. And yeah, that's a brilliant book, and it's a brilliant book to end on because it was just so good. I'd highly recommend it. I think I have a reading vlog where I read that book, so I'll link that down just in case you'd like to see my more detailed thoughts on it. But the characters were so wonderful. I loved that main character. I was so connected to her. I was so much just rooting for her, and it was just such a lovely story. It was so poignant. It was so moving. It kind of got me in the heart, that one. I have lovely memories of that book. I would highly recommend you read it if you haven't read it. Such a wonderful book. So yeah, we're going to leave it there. That's plenty of me talking about these books. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear if any of these are your favourites too. So please like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to see more of me talking about books. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!